As I mentioned, one of the big improvements in the ASP.NET framework is the support for asynchronous operations. And actually, I'm going to show you that in just a moment, but I want to talk about it a little bit first. So asynchronous methods are, as I said, going to allow the code that is waiting typically for some kind of IO-bound operation. So you can see here, so things like disk IO, service IO, anything like that, to return threads to the thread pool. Right? Now, prior to this, and by the way, this is still the old behavior, still the default behavior, right? You actually have to make your system asynchronous. It's not hard to do that. I'm going to show you how to do that. But typically, these are going to block the thread from servicing other requests, right? But when you release the threads, then that's going to increase the amount of threads or the amount of requests that can be processed simultaneously. Because if, let's say that the actual operation takes, let's say half a second, but you have to wait for 2 seconds for a service request, right? And then you're looking at a 2.5, and that's hopefully exaggerated, but you're looking at a 2.5 second time frame that thread is being blocked. Well, it's really only processing for half a second, and those are just numbers out of the air, but that's the idea. Okay? And so by doing this asynchronously, you can potentially, under the right circumstances, drastically improve the performance of your application, right? And so this, of course, is going to happen where you've got things like load spikes, and in general is not consistent, right? If I've got a system where I'm consistently having this type of operation, you have to think about the fact that at some point the processing needs to happen, right? And so let's say that I go to a website and let's say I request an image. And every time an image is requested, the image actually has to go through some processing, and the request itself doesn't really take up that much processing, but I've got a background worker that is working with the image, and so the app has to communicate with that, right? Well, if that's happening all the time, then the asynchronous processing is not really going to help, because eventually all of your people are waiting for that background processing to occur. Okay, so just keep that in mind, that there's this is asynchronous is something that there's a tremendous amount of really valid momentum towards asynchronous programming, but you also have to understand the actual architecture of your application and the load of your application. This is where things like application insights can be so useful. Is it really helping my application that it's asynchronous, or is this something where I need to look at maybe keeping asynchronous functionality, but it's really a scale issue where I've got to scale things out, because the fact that it's asynchronous in the end, not really helping the end-to-end performance of the application, because it's not meeting those kind of transient spike characteristics that this asynchronous capability is most helpful for.